You told me you are a virgin, but you didn't bleed.
I am. My husband, not all virgins bleed. So it is true. You are not a virgin. You came here already spoiled. She didn't bleed. Are you sure? I checked the sheet myself. Then what did we marry?
Before we continue, kindly like this video and subscribe to this channel. And if you are coming from TikTok or Facebook, let me know in the comment section. In Ajakoro village, marriage is not just a union between two people. It is a public agreement between families, ancestors, customs, and expectations that have existed longer than memory. A wedding is watched closely, not for love, but for signs. Signs that confirm whether a woman is worthy of the home she is entering. On the morning Sade was married, the entire village believed they were witnessing the beginning of something pure. The day started early, long before the sun rose fully into the sky. Roosters crowed from different corners of the village, and thin smoke curled upward from mud kitchens where women prepared food for guests who would soon arrive. Mortars hit rhythmically as yams were pounded, and palm wine cooled quietly in clay pots under the shade of mango trees. Drums rested nearby, waiting for the right moment to speak. Sade was the bride everyone approved of. She was gentle, obedient, and well-raised, the kind of girl mothers pointed at when advising their daughters on how to behave. Her mother, Mama Morayo, had raised her alone after her husband's early death, and people often praised her strength and discipline. They said she had done well. They said her daughter carried no stain. Those words followed Sade everywhere that morning. Good girl, proper girl, clean girl, words that sounded like blessings but carried invisible weight. Inside her mother's small room, Sade sat quietly as older women adjusted her wrapper and fixed her head tie. Her heart beat faster with every movement. This was not fear of marriage itself, but fear of expectation. In Ajakoro, a bride did not just marry a man, she married tradition, and tradition was unforgiving. Mama Morayo watched her daughter closely, her eyes lingering longer than usual. There was a heaviness in her gaze that no one else noticed. She had lived long enough to know that some celebrations come with hidden deaths. As she blessed her daughter, her hands trembled slightly, not from joy alone, but from knowledge she had buried years ago. Sade smiled through it all, unaware of the storm gathering quietly behind her joy. When Kule Adeyemi arrived, the mood shifted. Kule was a respected man, educated and successful, a bridge between village pride and city achievement. People admired him not just because of his wealth, but because he returned home often and honored tradition. To the villagers, he was proof that one could taste the modern world without abandoning the old ways. When he stood beside Sade during the ceremony, they looked perfect together. Elders prayed over them, invoking fertility, peace, and honor. No one questioned the deeper meaning of those prayers. Everyone understood them. As evening approached and guests slowly dispersed, laughter faded into the night air. The drums grew quiet and oil lamps flickered softly. The village settled into the kind of silence that only comes after celebration. Inside the marriage room, expectation filled the air more loudly than sound ever could. That room itself was simple, but it carried centuries of meaning. In Ajakoro, that room had witnessed many beginnings and many endings. It was where reputations were confirmed or destroyed. Sade lay awake long after the lamp dimmed. Her mind refused to rest. She thought of the stories she had heard growing up, whispered among women, but never spoken openly. Stories of brides whose lives changed overnight. Stories that always began with joy and ended with shame. She tried to calm herself, reminding her heart that she had done nothing wrong. Yet, tradition does not always care about truth. It cares about proof. As the night stretched on, something important failed to happen. There was no pain, no sign, no mark that tradition demanded as evidence of purity. The room remained quiet, but the silence was no longer peaceful. It felt heavy, suspicious, and filled with questions that had no answers yet. As the first morning light returned to Ajakoro village, one truth stood quietly in the room with her. The bride everyone celebrated unknowingly stepped into a trial she was never prepared for. And once the sun fully rose, there would be no hiding from it. By noon, the house no longer belonged to joy. It belonged to questions. The compound that had thundered with drums the night before now hummed with low voices, measured, careful. dangerous. Women moved in clusters, their wrappers tied tighter than usual, their eyes doing the talking, their mouths pretended not to. She felt it before she heard it. That subtle shift in air when a room decides something about you. Her husband did not ask her anything that morning. He barely looked at her. When he did, his eyes searched, not her face, but the answer to a question he did not yet know how to voice. She busied herself with tradition, greeting elders, kneeling, smiling, pouring water. The perfect bride. The kind mothers point to and say, see how well she was trained. But behind her, the whispers walked freely. She didn't bleed. Are you sure? I checked the sheet myself. Then what did we marry? In that house, blood was proof and silence was guilt. She learned that morning that innocence does not defend itself well in a court of tradition, because tradition does not listen. It remembers only what it has always believed. An aunt called her aside, the kind with a soft voice and sharp eyes. My daughter, she said gently, these things happen. Maybe you should explain. Explain what? Explain that her body did not follow a script written by people who never studied bodies? Explain that virginity is not a liquid. Explain that she had done nothing wrong. She opened her mouth, closed it again, because explanations mean nothing when people have already decided the ending. By afternoon, the elders gathered. Men sat with crossed legs and crossed minds. Women stood at the edges, pretending to be neutral while sharpening judgment. Her mother-in-law did not sit close to her. That distance spoke louder than insults. A man cleared his throat. He said, the issue before us is not small. No one mentioned her name. She had become the issue. Her husband finally spoke. His voice was not angry. That hurt more. He said, I married her in good faith, but I was not told everything. Her heart dropped, not because of the words, but because of the pause before them, the pause where trust should have lived. She wanted to scream. She wanted to stand and say, my body is not your evidence. Your ignorance is not my shame. But Nigerian girls are raised to know when silence is survival. So she sat and listened as her life was examined like a faulty product. By evening, a conclusion hovered in the room, unspoken but heavy. Something must be done. She was sent back to the bedroom alone. That same bed that had welcomed her as a bride now held her like a suspect. She stared at the ceiling and understood something terrifyingly clear. This was no longer about virginity. It was about control. About honor that lived in blood, not truth. About a woman paying for myths with her dignity. And somewhere outside that door, a decision was forming, one that would change the rest of her life. The knock did not ask permission. It arrived with authority. 3 slow taps, heavy with intent. She sat upright before the door opened, as though her body already knew that whatever entered next would not be kind. 2 women came in first, older, married long enough to have forgotten how fear feels when it is new. Behind them stood her mother-in-law, arms folded, lips pressed into a line that had rehearsed disappointment all day. No greetings were exchanged. One of the women gestured to the bed. Where is the cloth? She blinked. What cloth? The slap was not loud, but it landed with purpose. The cloth from last night, she snapped. Do not insult us. Her ears rang, not from pain, but from shock. This was happening too fast, faster than logic, faster than mercy. I don't have any cloth, she said quietly. There was no bleeding. The room stiffened. That sentence, so simple, so honest, felt like a confession. Her mother-in-law exhaled sharply, as though she had been waiting for this final confirmation. So it is true, you came here already spoilt. The word spoilt burned. Like food left out too long, like something no one wanted anymore. She stood up. For God's sake, she said, voice trembling but loud, I have never been with a man before my husband. They laughed. Not cruelly, Worse, knowingly. One of the women shook her head. Girls of nowadays say this easily. Another added, blood does not lie. She realized then that truth had no witness in that room. Only tradition did. Only myth. Only fear dressed up as wisdom. They ordered her to sit back down. She obeyed. Obedience she had learned delayed punishment. It did not cancel it. A man's voice came from outside the door. An uncle, one of the elders. We cannot allow this stain to enter the family. Something must cleanse it. The word cleanse made her stomach turn. She looked at her hands, these hands that had cooked, prayed, waited, hands that never touched what they accused her of touching. Yet here she was, guilty without crime. They told her what would happen next. There would be a test, a proof, a ritual older than reason. They said, if you are pure, nothing will happen to you. That is how they always say it, as though innocence is immune to cruelty, as though pain only visits the guilty. She wanted to ask where her husband stood in all this, wanted him to speak, to defend her, to remember the woman he married barely hours ago. But he did not come. His silence was the loudest verdict of all. That night she did not sleep. She lay awake listening to footsteps outside, to hushed arguments, to the slow construction of a decision made entirely without her consent. By morning, the compound would awake to a new plan, and she, still a bride in name, would be led somewhere she had never agreed to go. Not because she had done wrong, but because she had failed to bleed. Dawn arrived without mercy. Not the gentle kind that stretches slowly across the sky, but the harsh one that exposes everything it touches. The compound woke early, as if the sun itself had been invited to witness what was about to happen. She was not allowed to bathe. You must remain as you are, one of the women said, so nothing interferes with the truth. Truth. That word again, used like a weapon. They wrapped her in a plain cloth, nothing bridal about it, no jewelry, no perfume, no softness. She was no longer a bride, she was evidence. As they led her out, she noticed how carefully people avoided her eyes. Some looked at the ground, some stared openly. A few whispered prayers, not for her, but for the family name. Her feet felt heavy, as though the earth itself resisted each step. They took her behind the compound to a small open space near an old tree, the kind of place where stories were passed down without ever being questioned, the kind of place where pain had history. An elderly woman sat waiting. Her back was bent, her hand steady in a way that spoke of repetition. Beside her lay objects wrapped in cloth. No one explained them. Explanations softened things. This was not meant to be soft. Her husband stood at a distance, not far enough to claim ignorance, not close enough to claim responsibility. Their eyes met briefly. She searched his face for doubt, for love, for something human. She found none. Only fear, of disgrace, of gossip, of being laughed at by men who measured manhood through women's bodies. The elder woman began to speak. This ritual reveals what words try to hide. If she is clean, she will return unharmed. The sentence sounded practiced, reassuring, familiar. No one asked her if she agreed. Consent had no place here. They told her to kneel. The ground was cold, damp. It smelt of earth and old secrets. Her heart pounded loudly. She wondered if others could hear it. She tried to pray, but the words tangled in her mouth. Instead, a single thought repeated itself over and over. I did nothing wrong. The ritual began. She felt the first thing before she understood what was happening. Sharp, unexpected. Her body jerked on instinct, but hand held her shoulders down. Stay still, someone whispered urgently. Do not complicate matters. Pain bloomed, not just physical, but humiliating, the kind that strips dignity before it wounds flesh. Her breath came in short, broken gasps. She cried out. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a sound, a small, raw sound that did not fit the ceremony. The elder woman paused. People leaned forward, waiting, watching, judging. And then blood. Not the kind they wanted, not the kind that proves myths, but the kind that comes from harm, from force, from a body pushed too far. Murmurs erupted. This is not how it is supposed to be. Something is wrong. She slumped forward, shaking, tears soaking into the cloth around her. Her body hurt, but her spirit hurt more. Because in that moment, she understood the cruelty of it all. Even now, bleeding from pain, they would not call her innocent. The blood they wanted had to come on their terms. Anything else was inconvenience, failure, excuse. They ended the ritual abruptly, not because she was proven pure, but because the ritual had lost control. She was carried away, not with care, but with urgency, as though the problem was no longer her supposed impurity, but the visible consequences of their actions. Behind her, voices argued. Some said she must be hiding something deeper. Others said the ritual was done incorrectly. No one said they were wrong. As she lay later that day, weak and sore, staring at nothing, one truth settled into her bones. They would rather destroy her body than admit their belief was flawed. And the night was coming again. With it, a new kind of danger.
They called it discipline. By morning, the word had traveled faster than truth ever could. It moved through the compound with confidence, smoothing rough edges, excusing what had been done. She was restless. She resisted the process. The elder warned her to stay calm. Pain, when renamed carefully, becomes acceptable. She woke up on a thin mattress in a corner room she had never entered before. This was not the bridal room. That one had been reclaimed, washed, aired, reset, as though her presence there was a mistake quickly corrected. Her body throbbed in waves. Every movement reminded her of what had been taken without permission. She pressed her thighs together instinctively, as if to hold herself back into wholeness. A woman brought her warm water and herbs. "Drink," she said, not unkindly. "It will help you heal." Heal. As though healing was expected to return her to the same place that broke her. No one apologized. Instead, they advised. If you had been honest from the beginning, this would not have happened. Girls should know their bodies better. You must endure to save your marriage. Endure. That word Nigerian women know too well. It is taught early, sometimes before love, before language. Endure hunger, endure insults, endure pain, endure men, endure for peace, endure for family, endure until endurance becomes your only identity. Her husband finally came in the afternoon. He stood by the door as though unsure whether to enter fully. His eyes flicked briefly to the floor, then to her face, then away again. You embarrassed the family. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What did they do to you?" Not, "I'm sorry." Embarrassment mattered more than injury. She stared at him, unable to speak at first. Something inside her, something fragile, had cracked quietly. "I did nothing wrong," she said eventually. He sighed. "Whether you believe that or not, things have gone too far now. Too far. As though events had legs of their own. As though people did not choose every step. They say you should be grateful. Others would have sent you back to your father's house in shame. Grateful for staying married by force, for being hurt and allowed to remain, for being reduced and still kept." That night, alone again, she cried, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the careful way women cry when they know no one is coming to save them. Yet, beneath the tears, something else stirred. Anger. Not the wild kind, the quiet, dangerous kind. The kind that asks questions tradition hates.
Why must my body prove what my life already showed? Why is my pain acceptable but their ignorance protected? Why must survival always belong to silence? She realized then that enduring had cost her too much, and if she continued to endure, it will cost her everything. By the time sleep finally came, one thought remained clear, steady, unshaking. If she stayed quiet, they would rewrite this story forever. If she spoke, even once, even softly, the ending might change. And somewhere in the dark, for the first time since the wedding night, she did not pray for peace. She prayed for courage. Courage did not arrive loudly. It came in fragments, small, shaky, uncertain. It came in the way her hands stopped apologizing for existing, in the way her eyes lifted just a little when spoken to, in the way her silence began to choose itself instead of being imposed. By the third day, the compound had settled into a new rhythm. The drama had cooled. People returned to cooking, gossiping, laughing, proof of how quickly suffering becomes background noise once it no longer entertains. She was expected to return to normal. Normal meant compliance. Normal meant acting as though nothing irreversible had happened. That morning, her mother-in-law entered without knocking. She carried instructions the way some people carry scripture. You will go to the shrine tomorrow, a final cleansing. Final, as though the first had not already taken enough. Her chest tightened. Her body remembered before her mind could respond. No, she said. The word escaped before fear could stop her. The room went quiet. Her mother-in-law turned slowly. What did you say? She swallowed. Her heart raced. Every lesson she had ever learnt about respect, obedience, and silence screamed at her to take it back. But she didn't. I said no, she repeated, softer this time. Sama. It was the first no of her marriage. The first no that did not come with explanation or apology. A slap followed, harder than the last. Do not bring disgrace into this house, the woman hissed. You will do what you are told. Something unexpected happened then. She did not cry. Her face burned, her ears rang, but inside a line had been crossed, and once crossed, it could not be uncrossed. I will not go, she said. If you force me, I will scream. I will tell everyone what was done to me. Threat. A dangerous word for a woman to use in a house that already saw her as a problem. Her mother-in-law stared at her, stunned, not by the refusal, but by the audacity of it. You think anyone will believe you? She asked. They will say you are bitter. They will say you are hiding something. Let them, she replied. Her voice shook, but it did not break, because for the first time she understood something powerful. They needed her silence more than she needed their approval. That afternoon, the elders were informed. Arguments followed, low, strategic, calculated. Some said forcing her further would draw attention. Others worried about rumors. A few, very few, wondered aloud if the matter had already gone too far. No one mentioned justice, only reputation. Her husband came that evening, anger sharpened by embarrassment. You are turning this into something unnecessary, he said. Why can you not just cooperate and let this end? She looked at him then, really looked at him, at the man who had chosen peace with tradition over truth with his wife. I have already cooperated, she said quietly. I almost lost myself doing so. He had no answer. That night, she sat alone and realized something else. Saying no did not fix anything. It did not heal her body. It did not restore trust. It did not make her safe. But it did something just as important. It reminded her that she still existed, and that whatever happened next, whether she stayed or left, whether she was believed or not, her story would no longer be told without her voice in it. The house changed after her refusal. Not loudly, not all at once, but in the quiet, calculated ways power always responds when challenged. Conversation stopped when she entered the room. Food arrived late or not at all. Doors that had once been left open were now closed deliberately, softly, as if silence itself had learned to take sides. She had not been forgiven for saying no. She had been marked. In that compound, obedience was currency, and she had gone bankrupt. They no longer accused her openly. Accusations draw attention. Instead, they spoke around her. She's becoming stubborn. Marriage has humbled better women. Some girls don't understand correction. Correction. That word again, used to turn harm into guidance. Her husband withdrew completely. Nights passed without conversation, without touch, or without even pretense. When he did speak, it was with irritation, as though her presence reminded him of a problem he wished would solve itself. "You are making elders uncomfortable," he told her one evening. "As if my comfort ever mattered," she replied. He flinched, not because she was wrong, but because she was no longer afraid to be right. The retaliation deepened. Her phone was taken for her own good. Visits were restricted. Messages to her family were monitored, delayed, edited through warning looks. Control does not always announce itself as violence. Sometimes it comes dressed as protection. At night, alone in the small room they had reassigned her to, fear returned. Not the sharp fear of the ritual, but the slow, suffocating kind. The kind that asks dangerous questions. What if they never let me leave? What if speaking was the real mistake? What if endurance was safer after all? But then her body would ache and memory would answer for her. She began to notice something else too. The women. Not all of them looked away anymore. A cousin lingered one afternoon pretending to sweep. "You are brave," she whispered without turning around. Another woman pressed extra food into her hands at night, saying nothing, eyes downcast. Small rebellions, small solidarities. Proof that silence is often agreement, but not always belief. One evening, an argument broke out among the elders. Voices rose. Names were almost mentioned. Almost. Someone said, "If this girl talks outside, it will disgrace all of us." That sentence told her everything. They were afraid, not of lies, but of truth leaving the compound. That night, as she lay awake, she understood the full cost of her voice. Speaking had not freed her, but it had shifted the balance. She was no longer just a subject of rumor. She was a risk, and risks are either silenced or removed. By dawn, she had made a quiet decision. If they would not let her leave with dignity, she would leave with truth. Plans like hers were not made with confidence. They were made with trembling hands and borrowed hope. She did not tell anyone at first, not the cousin who slipped her food, not the woman who whispered brave. Words travel too fast in houses built on ears. Instead, she watched, counted, learned the rhythms of the compound the way prisoners learn guards. Who slept late, who prayed early, which door stuck when opened too quickly, which days the men left before sunrise. Survivor became strategy. Her body was still healing, but pain had sharpened her resolve. Every ache reminded her that staying meant slowly disappearing, piece by piece, until there would be nothing left to rescue. She thought of her parents, of how her mother had cried with pride at the wedding, of how her father had shaken hands, smiling, trusting another man with his daughter's life. If she returned now, she would return changed. and Nigeria does not forgive women easily. She would be called impatient, disrespectful, a failed wife. People would ask the wrong questions. Why didn't you endure? Why didn't you pray more? Why couldn't you keep your home? No one would ask what had been done to her. The night before she planned to leave, she sat on the edge of the mattress and allowed herself one moment of fear. Not fear of escape, but fear of being found. She imagined being dragged back, the shame amplified, the punishment doubled. She imagined her voice taken completely this time, not by ritual, but by force. She almost stayed. Almost. But then she remembered the blood on the ground that did not count, the slap that followed her first no, the way her husband had looked at her like a problem he regretted solving, and she stood up. At dawn, the compound stirred as usual. Pots clanged, roosters cried. Life pretended nothing was wrong. She wrapped a small cloak around her waist and hid the little money she had managed to keep, given quietly by the cousin, pressed into her palm with a look that said run without saying it aloud. When the gate creaked open, her heart nearly stopped. But no one called her name. No one chased her. She walked. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Each step away from the compound felt unreal, like crossing a line no one had drawn but everyone enforced. By the time she reached the main road, her legs were shaking. She did not look back, because some doors, once chosen, must never be re-entered. She did not know where she was going, only where she was no longer willing to stay. And as a bus approached, dusty, overcrowded, loud, she realized something quietly profound. Leaving did not make her free, but staying would have made her disappear. She climbed aboard. As the bus pulled away, the compound shrank into the distance, not as a home lost, but as a life refused. And for the first time since the wedding night, she breathed without permission. She did not disappear quietly. By evening, her absence had become noise. Phones rang, questions flew, names were spoken with urgency, then anger. By nightfall, the story had already been written, edited carefully, stripped of her pain, polished for public consumption. They said she ran away, not that she fled. They said she was ashamed, not that she was injured. They said she had been hiding something all along, not that something had been done to her. In Nigeria, reputation travels faster than truth, and it rarely asks permission before arriving. By the time she reached her mother's house, the call had already come. Her mother opened the door with eyes swollen from crying. Relief and fear battled on her face. Behind her, neighbors lingered, not close enough to help, not far enough to mind their business. Her father did not shout. That hurt more than if he had. He listened as she spoke, haltingly at first, then all at once. The ritual, the blood, the slaps, the silence of a husband who chose tradition over her life. When she finished, the room stayed quiet, too quiet. Her father rubbed his face slowly and said, "This is serious. People will talk." She nodded. She had expected that. Her mother reached for her hand, held it tightly, and said, "Talking will not kill her. What they did almost did." It was the first time someone had said it out loud. Outside, the calls continued. Relatives advised patience. Elders suggested reconciliation. Someone asked if she had really needed to leave. Needed. As if survival requires consensus. Her husband's family sent a message that night. They wanted her back, not to apologize, but to settle matters quietly. Quietly meant no questions. Quietly meant no accountability. Quietly meant pretending blood had never touched the ground. She read the message and felt something harden inside her. Not anger, but clarity. If she returned quietly, the story would remain theirs. If she remained silent, the next girl would bleed too. She realized then that escape was only the first act. What came next required a different kind of courage. The courage to be disbelieved, the courage to be blamed, the courage to speak anyway. That night, as she lay in her childhood room, surrounded by familiar walls that no longer felt entirely safe, she made her final decision. She would not return, and she would not lie. They could keep their version of events. She would tell hers. Even if it cost her peace, even if it cost her marriage, even if it cost her the protection silence sometimes gives, because some nights change you forever. And the night she didn't bleed had already demanded too much of her to ask for quiet now.
She spoke. Not all at once, not on a stage, not with rehearsed bravery. She spoke the way survivors often do, carefully, truth by truth, to people who asked the wrong questions but needed the right answers. To her mother, to a doctor who confirmed what tradition had denied, to an aunt who went quiet and never repeated the old jokes again. And slowly, the story changed shape. Not in the mouths of everyone, never that, but enough. Enough to unsettle certainty. Enough to make whispers hesitate. Enough to force some people to confront what they had protected for too long. Her husband did not come for her. He sent one final message, short, cold, formal. This marriage cannot continue under these circumstances. She read it without shaking, because by then she understood something vital. The marriage had ended the moment her pain became acceptable. She was called many things in the months that followed: stubborn, proud, unfortunate, a lesson. Some women were warned not to become like her. Some men laughed and said she was dramatic. But a few, quietly, carefully, asked questions. A girl sent a message late one night. They want to do what they did to you. What should I do? That message mattered more than reputation ever could. She did not become famous. She did not become celebrated. She became something far rarer, unashamed. Her body healed, slowly, imperfectly. Some scars stayed, not visible, but present. Yet for the first time, those scars belonged to her. Not as evidence, not as shame, but as memory and warning. She learned that innocence does not require proof, that blood is not truth, that silence is not peace when it costs your life. And she learned that survival is not always soft. Sometimes it is loud enough to offend tradition. The night she didn't bleed tried to define her, but she lived long enough to redefine herself. Not as a bride, not as a disgrace, not a lesson wrapped in whispers, but as a woman who refused to disappear for a lie that was never hers.